Well, good morning again, and good morning to everyone watching us online or who will view this later. I'm really glad to be here today because as I was leaving, I couldn't find my car keys, and I decided to text my wife and said, "You don't happen to have my car keys?" And she said, "Uh-oh." And so thankfully, if you believe in a creator or an all-powerful being or God or whatever you define that, brought us Uber. Uber saved me from doing a virtual message today, so I'm really so glad to be here with you all. So sometimes you have that experience when you get into a crowded elevator, let's say it's at a hotel or some convention center, and you're standing there, and as it starts to get more crowded and you begin to be packed with people and you start to avoid eye contact with them. There's something about being in an elevator, even though you're close to human beings who you know have a story and they are just like you in many ways, you don't want to see them. So you all stare at some lights with numbers on them as if it's some riveting thing that you're watching. And sometimes when you're in an elevator, you'll notice that there is a sign, and which I often do, it'll say maximum occupancy. And that number is sometimes given in number of people and other times in pounds. And you'll see this at amusement parks and you'll see it on small planes. And once in a while, when I'm in that experience and I see that sign, I start doing internal calculations. You know, I start estimating people like a carnival worker, okay, and I start adding it into my head, and I start evaluating strangers, and I start asking myself, are we close? Are we close to that number? And who decides that number? And how do they decide what the margin of error on that number is? So is 1800 safe? 1950 not safe? And so I always think about what is the threshold for this experience. And I was on that ride the other day thinking, well, they tell me this is safe, but now I no longer feel safe, right? So most of the things in our lives have a finite capacity. There are measurable limits to what kind of weight or tension or friction they can withstand until they break or fall apart, right? Our cars, our appliances, our houses all need to be fixed or have things replaced because pressure and time have taken their toll. There's often a race that we don't talk about with our undergarments that we're trying to figure out if the elastic or the fabric is going to wear out first, right? You know you've been there when you've had something that you own that you just wore into disintegration. Everything is finite. Everything has a capacity to break or break down, and human hearts are no different. Our emotional and our physical resources are not limitless. We can max out. And the problem is figuring out what we are capable of safely bearing isn't as clear-cut or easy. It would be nice if we all came with signs that said, here's my maximum bad news quotient, right? Or here is my argument capacity for the day. Here is my grief saturation point. Here is my social media threshold for the day. What can I bear and still be healthy? What can I sustain as far as grief or trauma or disagreement and still be a healthy human being? And figuring out what our limits are is a far less exact science. But the breaking points are even more critical because our hearts are not as easily replaced as cables or tires or mechanical parts. When we go past our compassion thresholds, we end up in negative behaviors or addictions or depression or physical illness or worse. Today, I want to make sure that you protect yourself from breaking down or burning out, from excess wear and tear on your ability to care about this world so that you are able to stay. What time is it? 10 It's 11:05 and you are alive. Up to this point today, you probably haven't given that much thought. Your heart is actually working. Your human heart, which is the size of a fist, weighs between 9 and 12 ounces, beats 100,000 times a day, 3 billion beats in a lifetime. The heart that beats about 60 to 80 times a minute, that pumps 6 quarts of blood through your body. That heart that began beating when you were about 4 weeks old, and it's not going to stop until you're done. It's likely you probably have a lot going on right now. You just got through school stuff, you've got family issues, health things, political realities, you've got global warming, you've got all these things, you've got national disaster, and you haven't stopped to consider that you're alive, that you're present, that your heart is beating, your synapses are firing, that your breath is expanding and contracting in your lungs, and that's really big news. You are here, and it wasn't a guarantee that you would be here today. Lots of people on this planet who were here yesterday are not here today. But you are here. This week I spoke at 2 memorial services, which is probably why this is on my mind. One in Orlando, as I mentioned, I was traveling there to speak at the anniversary of the Pulse nightclub shooting. If you're not familiar, 6 years ago, 49 people were killed at the Pulse nightclub at 2 a.m. From 2 a.m. to 5 a.m., 49 people lost their lives. And yesterday I spoke at a memorial service for a 65-year-old man who I'd never met, who was a musician and photographer and writer, and his body was taken quickly by an aggressive disease. And in each case, in the Pulse nightclub anniversary and in the memorial service for this gentleman, I reminded people there that they were alive, that they get to see that their loved ones and friends and strangers didn't get to see, and they get to have and they get to do the job of living right now. They have hearts beating in their chests like you do, which means they are alive with all the suffering and struggle, with all the beauty and blessings that comes with it. So if you were to grab your wrists and press in, you'd feel it. You'd feel the miracle of the fact that your pulse is there and that you are alive. The spectacular story of you being alive should be the bold type headline in your head today. But it's probably been crowded out by a lot of things that are the collateral damage of living, right? Your to-do list, unexpected medical emergencies, unscheduled water leaks, ants in the pantry, keys in somebody else's purse, trending disasters on your timeline, near fender benders in the parking lot, actual fender benders in the parking lot, tiny midlife crises that showed up when you saw yourself in your iPhone camera without warning. Did you ever turn that camera on by accident and you see how you look from underneath and horror strikes you and you begin to reevaluate your life choices and commit to get healthy? It's quite likely, friends, that you're so preoccupied and overwhelmed by the tasks and appointments and worries and obligations in front of you that you have forgotten that you're alive. And I want you to take a second and remember. I want you to feel that, to stop and notice the rise and fall of your chest. I want you to feel the fact that you're alive. And then I want you to remind yourself why you live. Not why you've survived to be present for another day. This is probably beyond our capacity. Not the grand why am I here, but since you are here, why do you live? What is your purpose for getting up today? Who or what are worth spending this day on behalf of? Who or what are worth your finite resources? This week I was sitting on the porch with my daughter. There was a thunderstorm, and we sit out there in the thunderstorms together, and we have since she was about 8 years old. I may have told you the story of how that started to happen, but she's now 12, and we were sitting there in the thunderstorm, and she was talking, and her head was ping-ponging between all kinds of topics, and she was just going on and on. I didn't really have to say much. And I looked at her and I reminded myself, that's why I live. She's why I work and speak and push back and persist and worry and fight to make a world that she deserves. Not just for her, but for every child in this moment who's hungry and scared and sick, for children who are not yet here and will inherit the planet that we'll make in this day. I started to think about my kids, my wife, my friends, my work. I started to realize there is a lot of reason to exist, even though some days existing feels like a real difficult task. I wonder what your why is. The people and the causes and the cares that make you get out of bed every morning. And I don't know your why, I just know that you have one. A burden you carry, a cause that grips you, an idea that you can't shake, a hill that's worth dying on, a face across from you on the porch, a person you are missing. And because you have such a beautiful, important, necessary why, it's important to be mindful of your how. Making sure that you live and work in such a way that you take care of the resources that you have so that you don't go past your maximum capacity for bad news. That you don't reach your threshold for sadness. Here are a few things I want you to think about doing. I want you to rest. We took 30 seconds today. Take longer today. Silence and solitude. Remember, pull away and have that me experience. And remember who you are outside of your role, outside of your label, outside of your name, outside of your obligations or responsibilities. Who are you when there's no one else around? Spend some time with that person, caring for that person, attending to that person. And I want you to do some things of self-care that you might not even think about doing. Drink some water. Take care of your body. Do the elemental things. Eat well and sleep, because guess what? That's how you sustain yourself for this work. And spend some time today in gratitude. Cultivate the things that you are grateful for, that you have been grateful for, even with the struggles, even with the pain, even with the grief and the worry about the future. What right now can you be thankful for? And take some time today to celebrate. In the face of the hatred out there and the disconnection and all that we are unhappy about, find times to laugh and enjoy and revel in the fact that your heart is beating, that your breath is in your lungs, because guess what? Some people don't have the option to celebrate today, but you do, and I do. And be in community with people. When I was sitting there on that floor in Orlando with strangers, and we bonded over the fact that we were about to see what we'd eaten over the past 3 or 4 hours, there was just something funny about it. Like, look at you. Yeah, look at you. Oh my gosh, we're strangers, and yet we have this bond. But the truth is, think about the places now where you sit today, in your home or in this room. Community is medicinal. It's part of our why, but it's also part of our how. If we don't have one another to get through the pandemic, and we don't have one another to get through the grief in this life and the struggles, well, life would be overwhelming, and we would probably reach our maximum capacity and we would break down. We've all been saved at times by someone else. by our friends, by our partners, by our kids. On the porch that day, my daughter saved me for a little while. She helped lift the weight of what I thought was important by showing me what actually is. So I want you, friends, to pursue intentional solitude and intentional community. Have the me experience and have the we experience of life, and remember that's part of not only why you live, but how you live. Who am I? Ask that. And then say, who am I connected to? What's the condition of my heart? And what's my connection to the heart of others? I love these words today by author Britton Oakman. She says, I lied today and said I was busy. I was busy, but not in a way most people understand. I was busy taking deeper breaths. I was busy silencing irrational thoughts. I was busy calming a racing heart. I was busy telling myself I'm okay. Sometimes this is my busy, and I will not apologize for it. So, mortality has been on my mind a lot because of these emotional memorial services. And I was thinking about my cousin-in-law, Stephen. He passed away at the age of 23 from many years of being ill. And we always asked, why him? Why so young? Why? And that was the wrong question to ask. So many of us tried to stop asking it. We asked ourselves, what now? What he's dealing with this, what now? And then after his death, it was, how will we honor his life? How will he become part of our why? And when he was 17, Stephen wrote this, and I want to read it to you today because I think it might be helpful. It's called, You're Going to Die, So Be Happy. It may sound morbid, but people have an expiration date. Sometimes people don't even get a chance to make it that long. Car crashes, sickness, acts of God, all these things have the potential to snuff out the light of life. I don't dwell on this reality, I merely acknowledge it. Accepting mortality allows for a more fulfilling life. You are going to die, so be happy. Last year, it was very likely that I had lymphoma. Various preceding medical complications, including a blood disorder and an immune deficiency, as well as 2 courses of early AIDS chemotherapy, had most likely mutated my cells into cancer cells. The outlook was grim. All of the tests came back positive, and when I was first made aware of this, I did not know how to feel. I didn't cry, I wasn't angry, I was just puzzled. I thought, young people don't get cancer. Sure, I have some other serious medical problems, but not anything as serious as cancer. The enormity of the situation was very real, and I understood it, but I just couldn't bring myself to feel anything. The full effect of this news came crashing down on me about a week later. I would have panic attacks and be unable to function. I finally knew damn well what emotion I was feeling, and it was fear. If things kept going on the way they were, I was going to die from panic long before cancer got me. That's when I made the conscious decision to accept the fact that I might die. And it might happen sooner rather than later, and it was liberating. Allowing the possibility of my death into my life allowed me to move past my fear. I started focusing more on the time I had left, making the moments count and not focusing on the petty, trivial pursuits that had governed a large part of my life. Gone were my worries about the quiz I failed and if my hair looked okay that day. It did. I devoted more time to family and the things I like to do. This was not denial. This was freedom. I realized that I might die, and this made me appreciate what time I had and how much my friends and family cared. I was feeling better than I had in a long time. The news came that this wasn't cancer, just a flare-up of the conditions that I had. The response my father received after relaying this information was, "That's cool." Needless to say, he was surprised. Nobody lives forever. Realizing this has made my life all that more precious. I do not have cancer, although I'm still 50% more susceptible than the normal person. I make more time for the more important things, and I worry less about the small stuff. Accepting that death is as much a part of life as life itself allows me for a more fulfilling and rewarding existence. This, I believe, a million seemingly important events and distractions threaten to crowd out your why today, to make you forget the reason you get up every day and brave the wounds and the worries that come with it. The people who give your life meaning and direction, the endeavors worthy of the blood pumping through your veins and the breath inside your chest. Refuse to let them. Today, realize that you're alive, and then remember why you live, and decide how you're going to live. Feel your pulse. Remember your heart is beating. Care for your heart in silence and solitude so that you can rest and remember your why. And then stay connected to the hearts of others so that you can be encouraged and cared for and know that you are not alone in this life. We have many hearts, but we share one pulse and we are alive. And that is beautiful news.